Good day, everyone! Londononion here, returning again with another build fitting for the Apocalypse difficulty. Our leading archetype for this build is the Alchemist, and the accompanying archetype is the Gunslinger. Taking a quick look at our agenda today, we'll start off with a build exposition, transition to determining its designation, and end off with a discussion on biome efficacy. Let's get started. Starting off with the armor of this build, this onion went with the Crimson armor set, minus the gauntlets. For maintaining a very specific encumbrance, this onion went with the Survivor gauntlets. This will be important a bit later. As for our relic, this onion goes with the Enlarged Heart for its efficiency. Moving on to the weapons, this onion has two primaries in mind, either the Black Maw assault rifle or the Bonesaw light machine gun. There are naturally strengths and trade-offs with either choice, but this onion decided to stick with the Black Maw. However, our stock footage will include both. The mod is purely up to preference. This onion favors the Song of Ether, but has also dabbled in the elemental ammo augmentations, specifically Hotshot and Corrosive rounds. For the mutator, Transpose was chosen for longevity and a damage increase. For the secondary, this onion equips the double-barreled shotgun with Ring of Spears mod and Hidden Power mutator. The melee weapon of choice is the Krell Axe with the Transference mutator. Moving on to our lovely trinkets, the amulet leading this build is the Whispering Marble. This one grants 3 stacks of Bulwark and increases all damage by 2% for each stack. The rings I equip are Reserve Boosting Gem, Sapphire Dreamstone, Dried Clay Ring, and Kolkit Eyelet. Reserve Boosting Gem grants health regeneration at 0.5 units per second. Upon going below 50% health, regeneration is buffed to 2.5 per second until reaching 50% again. Sapphire Dreamstone grants a 4% reduction in skill cooldown upon a critical hit. However, this ring does come with a 2-second cooldown. Dried Clay Ring grants a stack of Bulwark and increases all damage by 50% of the total damage reduction of one's Bulwark stacks. Lastly, Kolkit Eyelet grants 1 stack of Bulwark and increases health regeneration by 0.3 units per second for each stack of Bulwark. The traits I employ are the Summoner's Regrowth, 4 stacks of the Challenger's Strongback, the Explorer's Swiftness, Vigor, 2 units of Expertise, Bark Skin, Handling, Footwork, Recovery, and Resolute. As for the skills, I employ Stone Mist for the Alchemist and Bulletstorm for the Gunslinger. Now, it would not be an Alchemist build if there were no consumables. For this build to function as intended, this onion consumes Root Water, Strong Drink, Egg Drink, and Bark Extract. This will buff armor up to 146.6 units, and weight will be exactly 40.9 units, but due to the concoctions, will be in the light category with no stamina cost penalty. Topping off this build, we'll take a quick look at our fragments. Our main fragments are movement speed, skill duration, and fire rate. The prism fusions we go with are Gunfighter, Athletic, Munitions, and Pirate. The leftover slot goes to skill duration again. Now, with the build ascertained, we will move on to our designative process. For the designative process, I use a personally constructed build matrix to help illustrate the function of a given build. Builds are broken down into 2 camps, Tacticians and Predators. Predators have a greater prowess in close range / melee combat and have a reactive and aggressive-like strategy toward enemy encounters. Tacticians, on the other hand, excel in mid to far range combat and have a proactive and strategic approach to enemy encounters. The North and South poles are modifiers of the previously explained combat orientations. Specialized builds refine the main combat method to control for optimized carnage and execution. Such builds tend to be narrow in attack pattern and may struggle in circumstances that aren't conducive to their main means of offense and defense. They are, however, unparalleled when circumstances are conducive to their niche. Dynamic builds diversify offensive / defensive methods to be effective toward as many enemies / circumstances as possible. Such builds come with the shortcoming of overly convoluted use and stagnated offense, due to a lack of simplified capitalization. This in turn leads us to the lines. Each line acts as a designation and are present to varying degrees within each build. Determining our designation will be based on our evaluation of function. The more nuanced the evaluation is, the more likely it is a dynamic fighter/kiter. The more lopsided the evaluation, the more likely it is a specialized juggernaut/cannon. With this in mind, we'll move on to the evaluation. Starting off with the offensive capability, we have the greatest and most frequent damage numbers, and this holds the greatest weight in this category. Technically, the answer here is nuanced. Round for round, the double-barreled shotgun inflicts the most damage, but the Black Maw inflicts more frequent damage. However, when considering damage over time, the Black Maw takes a victory. Next, looking at ease of execution. Due to our handling trait, weapon spread and recoil are minimized factors. It is worth mentioning though that the Black Maw's reticle will still widen with continuous fire. The double-barreled shotgun, however, does not move at all. A marginal victory goes to the shotty. Lastly, practicality or applicability. Due to the ammo capacity and versatility, the Black Maw takes the victory in this subcategory with ease. Transitioning to restorative and defensive capability, health regeneration is purely automatic outside of relic use, and shields don't apply to this build. Aside from our amulet and rings, damage reduction is a product of the Alchemist Stone Mist, so restorative and defensive capability do not directly affect orientation. So moving on to our last category, build synergy. This is an important one, as it tends to be a tiebreaker by ascertaining the inherent scope/direction of the build. Looking at our amulets and rings as a whole, buffs to all damage is a trend, and despite this category being a tiebreaker, buffs to all damage acts as a neutral between Tactician and Predator. However, Sapphire Dreamstone buffs skill cooldowns with critical hits, and this will mostly come from range damage, especially from the Black Maw, which leans the build toward the Tactician side. Moving on to the Fragment/Prism enhancements, our main 3 fragments and fusions are geared toward an agile type, with a strong prowess toward ranged capability, with minimal attention granted to melee. This will again lean toward the Tactician side. Transitioning to the final category, skill enhancements, and this onion would extend this to include mutators. The Alchemist Stone Mist is neutral. The Gunslinger's Bulletstorm is purely oriented to ranged weapons, but of course benefits all types regardless of intended range. However, one would benefit more using the Black Maw while activating Bulletstorm as opposed to the Shotty. Taking a quick peek at the mutators, the main synergy that can be noticed is the Transference and Transpose mutators on the Krell Axe and the Black Maw. The reload buff on Transference applies to both weapons, but enhances the damage and continuous fire of the Black Maw, which again gives more weight to the Tactician side. For this synergy to take place though, one will have to make regular use of their melee weapon. The Krell Axe was equipped for its ability to be thrown, and the overloaded bursts are perfectly timed to add more ammo at each burst. Technically, even regular close-range strikes can trigger the effects, but it is not as long-lasting. This does provide some weight to the Predator side. With the evaluation complete, this onion has determined that our everlasting Eviscerator is a Tactician, and fitting for the Kiter designation. Kiters are comfortable fighting on their back foot, and usually have no problem maintaining their distance while delivering damage. They lead with proactivity, but can still rely on dominating, Predator-like methods. Close range capability is mainly supplemental, but still effective for most situations that demand it. Despite the stacks of bulwark on this build, one's main lifeline is their speed and mobility. As long as one can maintain their distance effectively, their health will regenerate and victory should be assured through attrition and patience. But with this said, there is such a thing as being overwhelmed even with light encumbrance and nimble speed. Without optimized damage, enemies can pile up and make retaliation increasingly difficult. Alternatively, the fragility of this build demands that one maintain a more hyperactive style to minimize the odds of being blindsided, which in and of itself can place undue demand on our Eviscerator. Making regular use of the Krell Axe is key in the longevity of one's offense. This would ideally be performed on a tougher target, since they can likely withstand the overloaded duration mixed with issued damage. Not so tough targets will have to be left alone while overloaded, so as to take full advantage of transpose. With our build blueprint ascertained, we'll end off with a discussion on biome efficacy. Now, our biome efficacy discussion will take place across 3 fronts: biome topography, crowds, and elites. This won't be an exhaustive discussion, but areas of significance will be given some exposition in a synthesis-like format. Starting off with topography, given the nature of the everlasting eviscerator, it benefits most while in spacious, or at the very least, varied zones. With this in mind, Geisha and Nerud would have preferred topography, while Losam would be less forgiving in high-pressure circumstances. While playing through the different biomes, Losam had a greater frequency of stressful skirmishes due to more cramped battlegrounds, though to be fair, every biome has its spacious and cramped zones. However, environment is not everything, and this will transition us to the meat of this segment, starting off with crowds. Crowds are broken down into homogeneous and mixed profiles, then extends to crescendos and gauntlets, which bleeds into elite presence. Homogeneous groups of foes are not usually an issue, but if they are tougher targets, they can be problematic, as they will force a greater use of space and naturally more time per target. Mixed profiles, particularly airborne and grounded foes, will create a similar stress. The key is to treat each battle as an attritional one. Getting too greedy for a quick victory can cause one to fall into the trap of being still for too long, and consequently getting blindsided. At the same time, Ring of Spears and the double-barreled shotgun are meant to be a direct answer to overwhelming enemy pressure and potential blindsides. Now, the spears are strictly used for their protective rotation around the explorer. Shooting them has never proven to be useful for this onion while using this build, at least not in high-pressure circumstances. Weak enemies will be staggered, but tougher enemies will be left unfazed. Meanwhile, the double-barreled shotgun is meant to deliver decent burst damage. Crescendos are also not really a struggle, since they tend to be a spacious battleground riddled with common foes and a few elites here and there. This is where the attrition can truly shine. Take the Root Nexus in Yesha's Forgotten Field, for example. If attempting to complete the secret challenge of destroying the Root Nexus without eliminating the surrounding enemies, this is a suitable build for such a challenge. Even after the Root Nexus is destroyed, eliminating the remaining enemies will make an acceptable use of all of one's abilities and tactics that play into the Everlasting Eviscerator's build synergy. Again, the point is not necessarily to rush, but to operate as a tactician. Tough targets, or elites, can act as a source of ammo, while smaller targets are given more priority to relieve some of the enemy pressure. Gauntlets are similar in challenge, but aren't always accommodating in their environments, and this will vary from one biome to another. Yesha's Infested Abyss comes with the harsh challenge of obscured vision and a nerf that causes constant damage. Luckily for this build, the level of health regeneration supersedes the nerf and is nearly inconsequential, but this also bleeds into multiple elites. Elites as a single unit aren't an issue, but shielded elites, like the drone carriers of Nerud, can prove annoying, as the shields are an extra layer to constantly put up with. Elites and common foes together provide a similar challenge to crescendos as we had discussed earlier. Priority should be given to the smaller foes and treat the elite as target practice for the Krellax when possible. If enemies are too close-knit, then Ring of Spears and or Song of Aether should provide some breathing room. Weaker targets will be staggered by the spears, and the Song of Aether will slow all targets in the given radius. The same formula can be used for multiple elites as well, but a greater emphasis will need to be placed on employing Bulletstorm. Although attrition is the Eviscerator's meta, there does come a time when efficiency is necessary to reduce the odds of one being locked in a compromising position. Looking back at the Infested Abyss in Yesha, using Hotshot with Bulletstorm and Transpose activated is the most efficient means this build has of inflicting heavy damage. The Blooming Root Mantis and the Root Knights are a difficult pair, and consequently are better dealt with efficiently, especially considering their capacity for devastation. Distance management is also important. Separating targets or evading until the faster one closes the distance is ideal. In the case of multiple elites of different profiles, The more mobile one is best prioritized for elimination. They are inherently more dangerous since they can overwhelm our Eviscerator should the order of elimination be reversed. Aberrations can either be really simple or really annoying based on a couple of mutators, Displacer and minions/clones. Although this build is dynamic and capable of taking on attention-splitting enemies, the extra cannon fodder can act as an ammo sink, especially when attempting to capitalize damage on the main target. Displacer, on the other hand, can very well land our Eviscerator in a compromising position, and essentially force an evasion from what could be a central point of enemy concentration. Now, annoying does not mean incompetent, but will likely prove to be extra stressful. Attrition is the strength, but so are the blitzkrieg and dominating methods of juggernauts and fighters. However, those have their limits too. The juggernaut and fighter will take on more damage than expected, while the kiter will eventually burn themselves out, or ironically, get overwhelmed into submission. But as a dynamic build, switching up tactics for the purpose of self-preservation, both in vitality and resources, should always be at the forefront of any given user, lest one's patience become their insidious demise. This could look like an intentional switch from far to close range enemy engagement, standing back while one's axe does its job in providing ammo, and periodic evasion to allow health to regenerate. Overall, Yeisha and Nerud were the most favorable biomes to play through with this build. The topography is favorable to the most advantageous combat style. However, the enemy profiles of Nerud seem to favor shields, which make enemies slightly more annoying to deal with, and ultimately lengthen battles more than what is expected. As always, certain gauntlets and crescendos do create some challenge, but every build has its strengths and weaknesses based on their makeup. This is, however, only half the story for the true efficacy of this build. Tune in next week for part 2, where we will take a deep dive on the Everlasting Eviscerator's efficacy against bosses. It has been Londononion, and I will see you guys next time.